The moment I heard my own mother whisper in the dark, "We could sell the baby and get rich," the last bit of my childhood shattered. The monster I'd spent years protecting my sister from wasn't a stranger. He didn't live under the bed. He sat at our dinner table and called himself Father. This isn't a nightmare. It's the beginning of my true story, one that taught me that some cages aren't made of iron bars, but are woven from silence and fear. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. I am Laura Williams. I am 72 years old, and I live here in Columbia, Missouri. I was born in Hannibal, way back when the world was very different from what it is today. Time passes, wrinkles appear, but memories, oh, memories are kept safe in our hearts, aren't they? Nowadays, even though I'm retired, I still see a few special patients. You see, my loves, I became an obstetrician. For over 40 years, my hands brought children into the world, safely and with dignity. I've lost count of how many babies I've helped deliver, but each newborn's cry still moves me as if it were the first. The women in my town know me as Dr. Laura, the one with the blessed births. A title I carry with more pride than any diploma hanging on the wall. It was a choice born from pain, but one that blossomed into love. Every time I place a baby in the arms of a protected and supported mother, I feel like I'm healing an old wound, not just mine, but one that belongs to all of us. It's as if each safe delivery is a small victory against a past that tried to destroy us. Early in the morning, before any appointments, I brew a pot of strong coffee, the kind that'll put hair on your chest, and sit on my porch to watch the day begin. It's from here that I talk to you, through this little device my grandson taught me to use. Who would have thought this old grandma would learn all this modern technology? Life never stops surprising us. I started recording these stories because of my sister, Sophia. She always said our experiences could help other people, especially women and girls who go through similar situations. At first I was ashamed, you know. But then I realized that silence only protects those who don't deserve protection. If this story has found its way to you, perhaps there's a reason. My grandson says that sharing our stories on this device is a way to connect with souls across the miles. It brings me comfort to know I'm not just speaking into the void, but into your homes, perhaps as you enjoy your morning coffee or settle in for the night. Knowing you are there, listening, is like a warm hug for this old woman's heart. Today, I'm going to tell a difficult but necessary story. A story about how monsters don't always have sharp claws and teeth. Sometimes they have the same blood running through our veins. It's about bonds that should protect, but instead suffocate, and about how, even in the darkest situations, we can find a path to the light. It's the story of how I discovered that the family that should have protected us was the very one that threatened us, and how my sister and I had to create our own definition of love and protection. I'm going to go back in time to that simple house in Hannibal, where Sophia and I grew up, where it all began before everything changed forever. Hannibal in the 1,960 seconds. Oh, how I miss that time. Our house was on Cobblestone Lane, a simple little house with walls yellowed by time and faded blue wooden windows. It was small, but for two girls like Sophia and me, it seemed like a palace full of hiding spots and secrets. I was born in 1953, the first daughter of Arthur and Dolores Williams. Dad worked as an accountant at the only bank in town, Commerce Bank, always in a suit and tie, even in the scorching heat of a Missouri summer. He was a respected man in the community, the kind who made sure everyone knew it. An upright man, the neighbors would say. He had deep-set eyes, dark as wells, and large hands that seemed to swallow anything he held. He hardly ever smiled, but when he did, it was more out of politeness than joy. Mom, Dolores, was a quiet, beautiful woman with long black hair always tied in a tight bun. She managed the house with almost military precision. A place for everything, and everything in its place, she would repeat like a mantra. She had only studied up to elementary school, but could do math better than many educated people. She controlled the household finances with an iron fist, always worried about saving for hard times. Sophia arrived when I was 5, in 1958. I still remember the day I saw her for the first time, so small and red, wrapped in a yellow blanket that Grandma Eleanor had made. "This is your little sister, Laura. You'll have to help take care of her," Mom said with a look I would only understand many years later. A look of someone handing over a burden, not a gift. And I did take care of her. From a young age, I was more of a mother than a sister to Sophia. I was the one who bathed her, combed her hair, taught her her first letters. Sophia was a girl with an easy smile and curious eyes, so different from our father's. She had golden curls that shone in the sun as if they had a light of their own. "She looks like a little angel," the ladies at Sunday church would say, and she would lower her head, embarrassed by the attention. Our routine was simple, like any family in a small town back then. We woke up with the first crow of the rooster. We'd have breakfast with buttermilk biscuits and apple butter. Sophia and I went to the local public school, where we were in different classrooms. I was always ahead. She was always at the right pace. In the afternoon, we played in the dirt backyard among the chickens and the apple tree that was heavy with fruit in the fall. We had few store-bought toys. I had a rag doll that Mom made, already patched up several times, and Sophia had a teddy bear her godfather gave her at her christening. But we didn't need much. We made houses out of dry leaves, played hide and seek among the sheets hanging on the clothesline, and made up stories about princesses and dragons. On our street, we had neighborhood friends. Billy from the general store, a freckled boy who could whistle like a bird, Matilda from the bakery, who always had a piece of cake hidden for us, Tessa, the seamstress's daughter, who taught us how to braid our doll's hair. We were an inseparable group, the kind that forms in small towns where everyone knows each other by name. At night, before sleeping, I would tell Sophia stories. Stories I made up on the spot about brave girls who saved enchanted kingdoms. Sophia would listen with shining eyes, clutching her teddy bear. We slept in the same room, in separate beds, but she often ended up in mine after a nightmare or during a storm. But I remember that around the time I was 9, something started to change in our house. Dad started coming home later from work, smelling of whiskey on his breath, and in a mood heavier than usual. Mom became even more silent, as if trying to become invisible. The arguments started quietly after we went to bed, but over time they got louder, impossible to ignore. "You spend more than I earn, woman," Dad would yell. "How am I supposed to handle everything alone?" Mom would reply in a rare tone of defiance that quickly faded under his gaze. The following mornings, we would sometimes notice purple bruises on her arms, which were quickly covered by long sleeves. Sophia started having more frequent nightmares. "There's a big, dark monster in my closet," she'd say, trembling. I would hug her tight and promise that nothing bad would happen to her as long as I was there. A promise that years later would be painfully tested. I remember one specific day, when I was 11 and Sophia was 6. It was Sunday, the day for a special lunch with fried chicken and mashed potatoes. We were all at the table when Sophia accidentally knocked over a glass of grape juice. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth Mom had just ironed. There was a terrible silence, as if time had frozen. Dad looked at Sophia with those deep-set eyes, now flashing with anger. He raised his heavy hand, and I, without thinking, put myself in front of my sister. "It was an accident," I said with a courage I didn't know I had. His hand stopped in midair, trembling. "Both of you, to your room." "Now," he said through gritted teeth. We spent the rest of the day locked up, hungry, but together. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would always protect my little sister, no matter the cost. That incident was just a sign of what was to come in the following years. Like raindrops that announce a storm, small moments of tension began to accumulate. Those years were a lesson in hypervigilance. I became a creature of observation, my senses always on high alert. I learned the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, the specific way a door would creak when he was near her room. I measured the length of his gazes at Sophia, each one a silent alarm bell ringing in my soul. I felt a constant, low-level hum of anxiety, a knot in my stomach that never fully loosened. It was an exhausting existence, living not just my own life, but a second, secret life, as Sophia's silent guardian. The weight of it was immense, a secret I carried alone because I knew, deep down, our mother had already chosen her side. Dad started spending more and more time watching Sophia with a look that gave me chills. He never looked at me that way. It was a look I didn't understand at the time, but that my body recognized as dangerous, like the instinct of an animal that senses a predator's approach. It was around this time that Sophia started to become quieter, to smile less. The golden curls that once bounced freely were now always tied in tight braids at Mom's insistence. "Proper young ladies don't go around showing off their hair," she would say as she pulled my sister's strands tightly. And so, between moments of simple happiness and growing shadows, we spent our childhood in Hannibal, not knowing that the worst was yet to come, and that our lives would change forever when Sophia entered adolescence. But that, my dears, is a part of the story that still hurts to tell, even after all these years. It was in 1972, when Sophia turned 14 and I was already 19, that the shadows hanging over our house became denser, almost palpable. I had just gotten a position as a nurse's aide at the small hospital in Hannibal, my first real job, the beginning of my path in medicine. I was proud, full of plans, but also worried, because it meant spending less time at home, less time protecting Sophia. At that time, Sophia was blossoming into a beauty that drew eyes wherever she went. Her golden curls now fell to her waist when Mom allowed them to be loose, which was rare. Her face had lost its childish features, revealing delicate traits and deep blue eyes she had inherited from our grandma Eleanor. She was a shy girl, always with a book in her hand, dreaming of becoming a teacher someday. "Laura, I don't like being alone with him," Sophia confided in me one night as I brushed her hair before bed. It was the first time she had verbalized what I had feared for years. "What do you mean, Sophia? What happened?" I asked, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. "Nothing. Yet," she answered quietly, looking at her own hands. "But the way he looks at me. And yesterday, when you were at the hospital and Mom went to the market, he stood at my bedroom door, watching me change clothes. He didn't say anything, just stood there. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of quitting the hospital crossed my mind, but I knew that job was our only chance for a future, to get out of that house someday. I decided to talk to Mom the next morning. "You need to keep an eye on Dad and Sophia," I said while helping with the breakfast dishes. Dolores looked at me with an expression I will never forget, a mixture of fear, guilt, and resignation. "What are you talking about, girl? Your father is a respectable man." "Mom, you know what I'm talking about. I see how he looks at her." She dropped a plate, which shattered on the cement floor. "Mind your own business, Laura. Some things are better left unseen." My dears, perhaps you're wondering, how could a mother say such a thing? Fear, you see, is a cruel cage. It doesn't just imprison the person within. Sometimes, it forces them to sacrifice the very ones they love most, simply to survive. It was like being slapped. In that moment, I understood I couldn't count on my mother. That slap didn't sting my cheek, my dears. It stung my heart. It was the moment I knew I was no longer a child. From that second forward, I wasn't just Sophia's sister. I had to become her fortress, because I understood no one else was going to. She knew, or at least suspected, but had chosen the path of silence, of denial. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of financial dependence, maybe out of that distorted marital loyalty that marked women of her generation. The following weeks were filled with suffocating tension. I started changing my shifts at the hospital to be home whenever Dad was. I asked the neighbors to check in on Sophia when I couldn't be there. I taught my sister to lock her bedroom door, to never be alone with him. One October afternoon, I came home early from the hospital and found the house strangely silent. Mom had gone to visit a sick aunt in Bowling Green, a neighboring town, and would be spending the night. I called for Sophia, but there was no answer. A terrible feeling made me run to her room. The door was locked, just as I had taught her. I knocked 3 times, our secret code. "Sophia, it's me." "Open the door." I heard movement inside, hurried steps, and then the door opened just a crack. Sophia's face appeared, pale, her eyes red from crying. "What happened?" I asked, entering the room and closing the door behind me. Sophia threw herself into my arms, trembling like a leaf. He tried to get in. He kept knocking on the door, saying he needed to talk to me, that he had a gift. I was so scared, Laura. I held my sister tightly, feeling a rage I had never experienced before. "Where is he now?" He left. He slammed the front door hard after I didn't open it. That night, I pushed my bed against the bedroom door, and we slept together, like we did when we were little. Sophia slept restlessly, murmuring in her nightmares. I didn't sleep a wink, planning what we would do from then on. The next morning, when Mom returned, I tried again. We need to talk about Dad's behavior with Sophia. Dolores closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing a blow. Then, with a firm voice she had never used with me before, she said, "There is no such thing as what you are insinuating, Laura. Your father would never do something like that. It's your imagination. Or maybe it's Sophia making up stories for attention. She's always been like that, dramatic." "Mom!" I exclaimed, horrified. "How can you say that?" "Enough." She cut me off. "I don't want to hear any more of these slanders against your father. He works from sunup to sundown to support this house, to give you everything you need. A little gratitude would be nice, instead of these absurd accusations." That was our last honest conversation. After that day, an invisible wall rose between us. Not just between me and my mother, but between the truth and what was allowed to be said out loud in that house. In the following months, I became almost obsessive in my vigilance. I swapped shifts, made up commitments to be at home. I taught Sophia to always walk with a friend, never alone. I started saving every penny I earned, dreaming of the day we could have our own place. But then, in March of 1973, I was selected for a specialized course in obstetric nursing in Kansas City. It was a unique opportunity that would change my career forever. It meant being away for 2 whole weeks. "I'm not going," I told Sophia. "I can't leave you alone." My sister, with a maturity that surprised me, held my hands. "You have to go, Laura. It's your dream." "I'll be fine, I promise. I can sleep at Matilda's house for a few days, and on the others I'll keep the door locked tight." Reluctantly, I agreed. I prepared everything meticulously before I left. I spoke with Matilda and her parents, who agreed to let Sophia stay for a few days. For the other days, I left prepared food, detailed instructions, and made Sophia swear she would keep the door locked at night and never, ever be alone with our father. The 2 weeks in Kansas City were professionally transformative, but personally, they were torture. I called home every day from the hospital's only payphone, but the conversations were always brief and supervised. Sophia could never speak freely. When I returned, something had changed. Sophia was different, quieter, more distant. Her eyes, once bright, seemed dull, as if looking inward, not at the world around her. I tried to talk to her, but she would change the subject, saying she was just tired from school exams. April turned into May, and May into June. Sophia started wearing looser clothes, refusing certain foods at breakfast, spending more time alone in the bathroom. My medical training set off all the alarms in my head, but my heart refused to accept what my mind already suspected. It was on a hot July night, as we were sharing a watermelon in the backyard, that I finally got her to talk. We were alone. Mom had gone to a church meeting, and Dad hadn't come home from work yet. "Sophia, you know you can tell me anything, right?" She looked at the slice of watermelon in her hands, the black seeds contrasting with the red flesh. A tear fell, mixing with the fruit's juice. "I think I'm sick, Laura," she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear. "What kind of sick, Sophia?" "My belly is growing. And I don't get my period anymore, you know." The world seemed to stop spinning. I looked at my little sister because that's how I still saw her. My little sister, no matter that she was already 15, and I realized how badly I had failed to protect her. "When was the last time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, professional. "March. Before you left for your trip." I closed my eyes, doing the math in my head. 4 months. She was 4 months pregnant. "Sophia," I began, choosing each word carefully. "I need you to tell me who did this to you. Please." She dropped the watermelon, wrapped her arms around her body, and began to sob. A silent cry, from someone who had learned to suffer without making a sound. "I can't say," she murmured between tears. "He'll hurt you too. He'll separate us." I didn't need to ask anything more. I knew. I had always known, deep in my soul. The monster I feared so much wasn't a stranger in the shadows. He was at our table every night, calling himself Father. That night, as Sophia finally slept, exhausted from crying so much, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A cold rage took hold of me, mixed with an overwhelming guilt. How had I not noticed sooner? How could I have left her alone? And now, what were we going to do? Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, that I would soon discover not only the extent of my father's monstrosity, but also the cold complicity of my mother, and that this discovery would change the course of our lives forever. Carrying that secret in the days that followed was like walking with a huge stone tied to my chest. Every breath hurt, every thought turned to how to protect Sophia and the child growing inside her. No one in town could know, not just because of the shame, but because of the danger. Who would believe us against the word of Arthur Williams, the respected accountant from the only bank in town? A week after Sophia's confession, I decided we needed a plan. Any plan. I got a day off from my shift, and we went to Crystal Creek, on the outskirts of Hannibal, where no one could hear us. "We're leaving," I said as we skipped stones on the water. "I have some money saved. We can go to St. Louis, or even farther. You can finish school there. I'll find work in a hospital." Sophia looked so small, sitting on that rock, hugging her body as if trying to protect it. "And how will we explain this?" she asked, pointing to her belly, which was already starting to show visible signs of pregnancy. "We'll say you're a widow, that your husband died in an accident. No one has to know the truth." She looked at the crystal-clear water, her reflection rippling on the surface. "I'm so scared, Laura. What if he finds us?" "He won't find us," I promised, with more confidence than I actually felt. "We'll go far, far away." We agreed to leave in 2 weeks, enough time for me to get my paycheck and organize everything without raising suspicion. We would pack our bags little by little, hiding them in the false bottom of the old wardrobe we had inherited from Grandma Eleanor. But fate, as always, had other plans. 3 days after our talk at the creek, I came home from the hospital to find Sophia sitting on her bed, her face swollen from crying, a terror in her eyes I had never seen before. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside her and holding her cold hands. "They know," she whispered. "Mom found the dresses I was letting out." She looked at my belly, then looked me in the eyes and said, "How long?" A chill ran down my spine. "And what did you say?" "The truth. That I'm almost 5 months pregnant." Sophia swallowed hard. "She didn't ask who the father was, Laura. She didn't ask." That lack of a question said everything. Dolores knew, or at least suspected, and she didn't want to confirm what she already feared. She preferred convenient ignorance to the unbearable truth. What did she do then? She left the room without a word. I heard her crying in her bedroom. Then she left and hasn't come back. That was this morning. I hugged my sister tightly. "Don't worry. We'll move our plan up. We'll start tomorrow." The bedroom door opened suddenly, and there stood Dolores, her eyes red, her face marked by an expression we had never seen, a mixture of despair and determination. "You two, in the living room." "Now," she said in a voice that allowed no argument. In the living room, we found Dad sitting in his armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his face unreadable. Dolores gestured for us to sit on the sofa and stood beside her husband. "Sophia is expecting a child," Dolores announced as if it were news to everyone in the room, including the child's own father. "Almost 5 months." Arthur took a long sip, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face, who kept her head down. "And who's the father?" he asked with a calmness that chilled my blood. The silence that followed was so thick, it felt like it had weight. No one breathed, no one moved. "Some boy from school, obviously," Dolores answered, breaking the silence. "It doesn't matter. What matters is what we're going to do now." It was in that moment that I realized. My mother was creating an alternate story, a fiction everyone could pretend to believe in order to go on with their lives without facing the horror of the truth. "And what do you suggest we do?" Arthur asked, turning to Dolores with an almost amused expression, as if it were all a macabre game. "I have a cousin in Springfield," Dolores began, looking at some point on the wall, avoiding all of our eyes. "We can send Sophia there until the baby is born. We'll say she went to take a course, learn to sew, something like that. Then she comes back, without the baby. And what happens to the child? I asked, unable to contain myself in the face of that cold plan. It was Arthur who answered, with a smile I will never forget. There are couples who would pay good money for a healthy baby. No questions, no paperwork. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just the horror of the abuse. It was the realization that they were planning to sell the child, their own blood, as if it were merchandise. Dolores has a friend who knows people in street. Louis, Arthur continued, now looking directly at Sophia. Rich people who can't have children, they'd pay very well for a newborn. Enough for us to buy that plot of land on the outskirts of town, build a better house. Hearing that, it seems impossible to believe, doesn't it? I wish it were just a made-up story myself. But no, my dears. Monsters don't only exist in fairy tales, and the most terrifying thing is that sometimes they wear the face of someone we call family. I looked at my mother, desperately searching her face for a flicker of protest, a sign of the woman who had once sung me to sleep, but there was nothing. Her eyes were vacant, her expression a mask of grim acceptance. In that chilling moment, I understood the terrible bargain she had made. She wasn't just sacrificing her daughter and grandchild for a quiet house or a new plot of land. She was sacrificing them for her own survival, choosing the monster she knew over the uncertainty of standing against him. The betrayal felt sharper than any physical blow. It was the moment I realized we weren't just two daughters. We were collateral damage in our mother's own private war. In that instant, the burden of survival fell squarely on young Laura's shoulders. With both parents now their captors, escape was no longer a choice, but a desperate necessity. Stick around to hear how these two sisters begin to plot their way out of this living nightmare. You see, my dears, some prisons aren't built with iron bars. They're built with silence, fear, and lies. That night, I realized our house was exactly that kind of prison, and our escape was no longer a choice, it had become our only path to survival. No, Sophia said, so quietly we almost didn't hear it. It was the first word she had spoken since we entered the room. What did you say? Arthur asked, leaning forward. Sophia lifted her face, tears streaming freely, but her eyes were firm. I'm not giving my baby away. Arthur stood up suddenly, knocking over the glass which shattered on the floor. Your baby? Your baby, he bellowed, taking a step forward. You think you have a choice, girl? You think you can decide anything in this house? I placed myself between them, pushing Sophia back. Don't touch her. You shut your mouth, he roared, pointing a finger at me. Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, always thinking you're in charge of something. You're in charge of nothing. Dolores intervened, grabbing Arthur's arm. Calm down, the neighbors will hear. He took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, regaining control. When he spoke again, his voice was low, but sharp as a razor. Listen to me, both of you. This is decided. Sophia is going to Springfield next week. The child will be placed with a family that can care for it, and the two of you will be grateful that I'm not throwing you both out of this house right now. And if we refuse? I asked, feeling a surge of desperate courage. The smile returned to Arthur's face, cold as death. Then you can both hit the streets. Without money, without references, without anything. Good luck explaining to the whole town why you were kicked out of your home. Good luck finding a job after that. That night, after Sophia finally fell into a restless sleep, I lay awake, my mind racing. Our escape was no longer a plan for the future. It had to become a reality now. The money we had wasn't enough. We would need more, much more, to survive far from here, especially with a baby on the way. And we would need documents, birth certificates, things that were kept in Dad's office under lock and key. In the days that followed, we lived in a nightmare. Dolores began preparations for Sophia's study trip. She bought fabric to make loose-fitting dresses, wrote letters to the cousin in Springfield, and spread the word to the neighbors that Sophia had received a wonderful opportunity. Arthur, for his part, made a point of constantly reminding us of his power over us. I already have an interested couple, he commented during dinner 2 days later. Good people. The man is a doctor. They offered an amount you wouldn't even imagine. Sophia barely ate, barely spoke. She spent hours looking out the window, one hand always protectively over her belly. At night, I would hear her whispering to the baby, promises that they would stay together, that everything would be okay. Meanwhile, I acted. I requested extra hours at the hospital. I accepted night shifts. Every penny went into our escape fund. I talked to an older nurse, Donna, who had relatives in Florida. I asked, as if it were nothing, about life there, the opportunities for healthcare professionals. A week before the scheduled date for Sophia's trip, I overheard a conversation between my parents. I was coming home late from a shift, and they didn't hear me come in. The couple wants to meet her first, Arthur was saying. Make sure she's healthy, that she'll have a pretty baby. That's not normal, Dolores replied, her voice trembling. That's not how it's done. And since when do you understand how these things work? He snapped. They're paying. They set the conditions. And it's not like we have many options, is it? Unless you want to explain to all of Hannibal how your 5-year-old daughter got pregnant. I went upstairs silently, my heart pounding. Entering our room, I found Sophia awake, sitting on the edge of her bed. What is it? She asked, seeing my expression. We have to leave. Now. Tonight. But our plan was for next week. You said we needed more money. We don't have any more time, I said, grabbing a suitcase from under the bed. He wants you to meet the couple who wants the baby. Tomorrow, maybe. Sophia turned pale, a hand flying instinctively to protect her belly. I won't let them take my child, she whispered, a fierce determination in her eyes that had always been so sweet. That night, while the house slept, we packed our bags in absolute silence. Just the essentials, some clothes, the documents I managed to secretly get from Dad's office, the money we had saved. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. At 3 inches the morning, we left through the back door. The Hannibal sky was full of stars, the cold August air cut like a razor. Sophia carried only a small bag and the teddy bear from her childhood, now worn from time and love. I carried the suitcase with our belongings and the uncertain future that awaited us. We walked through the sleeping town to the bus station. The first bus to St. Louis would leave at 5 a.m. From there, we would take another to Florida, to the house of a distant cousin of Donna's, who had agreed to shelter us for a few weeks. Sitting on the cold bench of the deserted bus station, waiting for dawn, Sophia rested her head on my shoulder. I'm scared, she confessed, but I also feel free for the first time. I held her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. We're going to be okay, I promised. You, me, and the baby. We're going to build a new life, far from here. Oh, the promise of a young girl in the dark. When I spoke those words, I was reassuring myself just as much as I was comforting Sophia. We had nothing but a little money and a fragile hope, but we had each other. And sometimes, my dears, that is all you need to start again. A life where no one will ever hurt you. When the bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the early morning fog, I felt a mix of terror and hope. We were leaving behind everything we knew, but also everything that hurt us. It was a leap into the dark, but it was our only chance. Last call for St. Louis, the impatient driver announced. I held Sophia's hand firmly, and we took the steps that would change our lives forever. With that single step onto the bus, they left behind everything they had ever known. But trading a familiar prison for an unknown future is a terrifying gamble, one that could lead to freedom or even greater danger. Let's follow them on their journey and see where the road takes them next. Little did we know that years later, we would look back on that night as the true beginning of our lives. The night we stopped being victims and became survivors. That cold August morning would forever mark our lives. The bus rattled on the country road that connected Hannibal to St. Louis, and every mile we left behind seemed to lift a little of the weight from our shoulders. Sophia slept with her head against the window, a protective hand on her belly. I, however, couldn't close my eyes. My mind was buzzing with practical worries. How long would our money last? Where would we stay until we could get to Donna's cousin's house? What if our parents came after us? Sophia would need medical care. The baby would be born in a few months. How would we register the child? So many unanswered questions. We arrived in St. Louis around noon. The bus station was teeming with people, a shocking contrast to quiet Hannibal. Sophia, who had never left our hometown, looked around with a mixture of fascination and fear. "What now?" she asked, holding my hand tightly. "Now we need to find a place to stay for the night. Early tomorrow, we'll catch another bus." We found a simple boarding house near the station. The owner, Mrs. Miller, a lady with gray hair and kind eyes, looked curiously at Sophia and her visible belly, but asked no questions. She just charged us for a small room with 2 single beds. That night, while Sophia slept, I went out to make a call from the payphone on the corner. I dialed the number Donna had given me, hoping to confirm our arrival for the next day. "Hello, may I speak with Mrs. Need? This is Laura, Donna's niece from Hannibal." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then a man's voice answered, "There's no Need here. I think you dialed the wrong number." My heart froze. I tried 2 more times with the same result. The number Donna had given me was wrong, or worse, she had misled me. I returned to the room, feeling as if the floor had disappeared from under my feet. We had nowhere to go. We were alone in a big city with money for maybe 2 weeks, and Sophia almost 5 months pregnant. The next morning, I told my sister the truth. The number is wrong. I couldn't reach Donna's cousin. Sophia looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "What are we going to do now?" Before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Miller, bringing a simple breakfast on a tray. "Sorry to intrude," she said, placing the tray on the small table in the room. "But I noticed you arrived yesterday without much luggage, almost just that one small bag. And the young lady." She gestured toward Sophia's belly. "Looks like she could use a good breakfast." I thanked her, not knowing what to say. "Mrs. Miller sat on the edge of one of the beds. "Look, it's none of my business, but I've seen many girls like you running from something, or someone." Her eyes softened for a moment. "My own daughter. She left home young, got into trouble. I didn't help her when I should have. Maybe this is my way of making things right. If you need a place to stay for a while longer, I can give you a special rate. I have a little room in the back, simpler, but it's yours for as long as you need." It was as if an angel had appeared in our path. That same day, we moved into the back room. It was actually an old storage room converted into a bedroom, with a small window and a tiny bathroom. But to us, it was a palace. It was safety. In the days that followed, we started to create a new routine. I got a job at a nearby pharmacy, thanks to my experience as a nurse's aide. The owner, Mr. Davison, was a bald, pot-bellied man with thick tortoiseshell glasses, who didn't mind when I explained I needed to help my widowed sister. Sophia stayed at the boarding house during the day, helping Mrs. Miller with light chores, folding sheets, organizing the pantry, answering the phone. In return, we received a discount on the rent and 3 meals a day. For almost 2 weeks, I believed we had made it, that we were safe, that we could rebuild our lives right there in Street Lewis. Until one stuffy September afternoon, I came home from work to find Sophia sitting on the bed, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to hug her. "He was here," she whispered, trembling like a leaf. "Dad, he came looking for us." I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. "How did he find us?" Mrs. Miller didn't let him in. She said she didn't know anyone by our names. But I saw him through the window, showing our pictures to people on the street. Just when a glimmer of safety appeared, the monster from their past found them. The fragile peace they had built was shattered in an instant, proving that this was no longer an escape, but a manhunt. Stay with us to discover if they can manage to slip through their father's grasp once more. We didn't sleep that night. We stayed up planning our next move. We couldn't stay in Street Lewis. It was the first place our parents would look. We needed to go farther, somewhere no one would think to search for us. "I've heard of a state, down in Florida," Mrs. Miller commented when we told her the situation. "Tampa. I have a niece who lives there. It's far, really far. And they have a new hospital, looking for people in healthcare." It was our only chance. The next morning, with the little money we had saved and some that Mrs. Miller insisted on lending us, we bought bus tickets to Tampa. The journey was long and exhausting. Sophia, now almost 7 months pregnant, suffered from the heat and the rough roads. We arrived in Tampa 2 days later, exhausted, hungry, but hopeful. Mrs. Miller's niece, Elaine, welcomed us into her simple house near the city center. She was a young woman, not much older than me, with an easy smile and kind eyes. Her husband, James, worked on offshore oil rigs, and she seemed happy to have company during his long absences. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, showing us the small but clean room we would share. "I only ask that you help me with things around the house." In the following days, I tried to find work at the new hospital, but I discovered that new was a relative term. The hospital was under construction and wouldn't open until the following year. I did, however, get a position as an aide in a private clinic, thanks to my experience in Hannibal. We started to adapt to life in Tampa. The warm climate, so different from the cool Missouri hills, the southern drawl that sometimes made us smile, the smell of the sea that came with the afternoon breeze. Slowly, our hearts began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we had escaped. Until one October night, Sophia woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. "What is it?" I asked, turning on the lamp. "A nightmare," she answered, trembling. "I dreamed he found us, that he took the baby away." I sat beside her, stroking her hair. "It was just a dream, Sophia. We're safe here. No one will find us. No one will take your baby." She nodded, but her eyes said something else. The fear had never completely left us. It had just hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. The next morning, Sophia couldn't get out of bed. She had a high fever, abdominal pain, and light bleeding. I panicked. "We need to get her to a doctor," Elaine said, worried. "It could be something with the baby." The only functioning hospital was in St. Petersburg, almost an hour away. James, who was luckily home that week, drove us in his beat-up old Ford Falcon. The drive was a nightmare. Every bump in the road made Sophia groan in pain. At the hospital, the doctor on duty, Dr. Isaac, a man with a white beard and gentle hands, examined Sophia carefully. "Her blood pressure is very high," he explained with a worried frown. "And there are signs the placenta might be detaching. We're going to have to admit her." "Is she going to lose the baby?" I asked, my heart in my throat. "We'll do everything we can to prevent that, but I have to be honest. The situation is delicate." "How far along is she?" "Almost 7 months," I replied. He nodded gravely. "If the baby is born now, the chances are slim. We need to keep him in there as long as possible. Every day counts." Sophia was admitted. I slept in a chair beside her bed, only leaving for quick showers in the hospital bathroom. Dr. Isaac came to see her twice a day, always with an encouraging smile, even when the tests showed no improvement. "You're a fighter," he would say to Sophia, checking her pressure, "and your baby is too. You're fighting together." It was during those agonizing days that I made my decision. If we could get through this, if Sophia and the baby survived, I would become a doctor. Not just a nurse, a doctor, an obstetrician. I would dedicate my life to helping women bring their children into the world with safety and dignity, something that was almost stolen from my sister. On the 7th day of her hospital stay, I woke up to Sophia squeezing my hand tightly. "Laura," she whispered with an expression I'll never forget, a mix of terror and determination. "He's here." "Who?" I asked, still groggy. "Dad." I saw him in the hallway, talking to a nurse. "He found us." My blood ran cold. "Are you sure? Maybe it was someone who looked like him." "It was him," she insisted, gripping my arm tightly. "I'm sure." "And he asked about my room. I heard my name." I ran to the door and peeked through the small window. The hallway was empty, except for a nurse tidying a medication cart. I returned to Sophia, trying to stay calm. "Listen, even if it is him, he can't do anything. We're in a hospital. There are people everywhere." "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her pale face. "If he found us, he'll take my son. He'll sell my baby." In that moment, I understood that Sophia was right. It didn't matter how many miles we had traveled, how many new identities we tried to create. Arthur Williams would not give up. It wasn't just the mistake he wanted to hide or the shame he wanted to avoid. It was the money, the deal he had made, the promise he had to keep. "We have to get out of here," Sophia said, trying to get out of bed. "No," I exclaimed, gently pushing her back. "You can't move. "The baby. If we stay, there won't be a baby," she replied with frightening clarity. "He'll take him as soon as he's born. You know that." She was right, and that certainty was like a stone in my stomach. But I also knew that if Sophia left that hospital, she could lose the baby, or worse. "I'm going to talk to Dr. Isaac," I decided. "I'm going to tell him the truth, the whole truth." Sophia grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with fear. "What if he doesn't believe you? What if he calls the police?" "We're minors, Laura. They could force us to go back." "We have to trust someone," I replied, feeling the weight of that decision. "And Dr. Isaac seems like a good man. It's our only chance." That afternoon, when the doctor came for his visit, I asked to speak with him privately. In his small office, with my hands shaking and my voice choked with emotion, I told him everything. About the abuse, the pregnancy, the macabre plan to sell the baby, our desperate escape, and about seeing our father there in the hospital, looking for us. I told him everything. The words tumbled out of me. A torrent of secrets I had held for so long they felt like poison in my veins. I spoke of the looks, the locked doors, the plan to sell a baby not yet born. I expected him to doubt me, to see me as a hysterical girl. When I finished, my voice a raw whisper. The silence in his small office was deafening. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, not for lies, but for the depth of my fear. "These are terrible accusations, young lady," he said slowly, his voice heavy. "They are a terrible truth," I replied, tears streaming down my face. "Please, sir, we have nowhere else to turn. You are our only hope." He leaned forward, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to rest on his next words. Then, he spoke the 3 words that saved us. "I believe you." In a world that had offered them nothing but betrayal, those 3 simple words were a lifeline. For the first time, Laura and Sophia weren't alone in their fight. But with their father now inside the hospital, can one good man's help be enough to protect them from a monster so determined? Let's find out what happens next. Those 3 words, "I believe you," were like a balm to my wounded soul. For the first time since we discovered Sophia's pregnancy, someone other than the 2 of us was on our side. "You can't leave the hospital," he continued. "Sophia needs medical care, and so does the baby. But I can move her to a private room in another wing. We'll use a different name on the registry, and I'll assign only trusted nurses to care for her." It felt as though a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "You would do that for us?" "I do this for any patient in danger," he replied firmly, "especially when it comes to protecting a child. 2 children, actually. Your sister is still 1, despite the pregnancy." That same night, Sophia was moved to a room on the top floor, in the special care wing. On her chart, she became Maria Anderson, a patient with preeclampsia. Only 3 nurses were authorized to enter the room, all instructed by Dr. Isaac himself. 2 days later, as I was sleeping in the armchair next to Sophia's bed, the room door opened silently. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. It was Dr. Isaac, his face grave. "He's here," he said in a low voice. "At the reception desk, showing pictures of you 2, saying you're his runaway daughters. He says the younger one has mental problems and needs specialized treatment." Sophia, who had also woken up, began to tremble violently. "He's going to find me," she whispered in panic. "He's going to take my baby." "He will not," Dr. Isaac assured her. "No one in this hospital will reveal where you are. But we have a bigger problem. Sophia's pressure is rising again. The stress is making her condition worse." As if in response to his words, Sophia clutched her belly with a groan of pain. "It hurts," she murmured, "so much." What followed was the longest night of my life. Sophia went into premature labor. The baby was coming 3 months early. Dr. Isaac decided not to take her to the conventional delivery room, fearing Arthur might see her. Instead, he turned that private room into a small operating theater. "The baby is in distress," he explained after examining Sophia. "We're going to have to do an emergency C-section." Sitting in the hallway while they prepared Sophia for surgery, I felt like I was living a nightmare. Outside that hospital, our father was searching for us with a false story and terrible plans. Inside, my sister was fighting for her life and her son's. And I, in the middle of it all, had never felt so helpless. One of the nurses, Claire, A middle-aged woman with kind eyes sat beside me. "Do you believe in God, child?" she asked, holding my hand. I nodded, unable to speak. "Then let's pray, because your sister and that baby are going to need all the help they can get." The surgery lasted 2 hours that felt like an eternity. When Dr. Isaac finally came out of the room, his scrubs were stained with blood, and his face showed exhaustion. "Sophia is stable," he said, taking off his mask. "She lost a lot of blood, but she'll recover." "And the baby?" I asked with a trembling voice. There was a heavy silence before he answered. "It's a boy. He's very small, less than 2 pounds. He's struggling to breathe. Will he survive?" Dr. Isaac placed a hand on my shoulder. "I can't promise that. The next 48 hours will be critical. We've done everything we can. Now it's up to his strength." The baby, whom Sophia would later name Gabriel, was placed in a makeshift incubator. He was so small he could fit in the palm of my hand, with skin as thin as paper, almost translucent, a network of bluish veins visible all over his body. A tiny tube helped him breathe, and wires connected him to monitors that beeped constantly. Sophia, still under the effects of anesthesia, couldn't see her son for the first few hours. When she finally woke up, weak and confused, the first thing she asked was, "My baby?" "It's a boy," I answered, holding her hand. "He's fighting, Sophia. He's small, but he's strong." She tried to sit up, desperate to see him. "I need to be with him. If Dad finds him, no one will find him, I promise." Dr. Isaac put a security guard outside the room where he islanded. "And you can't get up now. You just had surgery." The next morning, a nurse brought disturbing news. Arthur was still at the hospital, now claiming to be the grandfather of the premature baby born the night before. Somehow, he had found out about Sophia's delivery. "He's demanding to see his grandson," the nurse explained. "He says he has legal rights." Dr. Isaac, who had spent the entire night monitoring Gabriel, made a radical decision. "We're transferring the baby and Sophia to another hospital. I have a colleague in Tampa, at Tampa General Hospital. He can take them today." "What about my father?" I asked, terrified at the thought of a confrontation. "We'll distract him. We'll say there were complications, and that the baby didn't survive. It's the only way to make him give up." It was a risky plan, but it was our only chance. That afternoon, while Arthur waited in the reception area, Sophia and Gabriel were placed in an ambulance at the back of the hospital, heading for Tampa. I would follow them in a separate car, driven by Dr. Isaac himself. Before we left, the doctor went to personally give the news to Arthur. I watched from a distance, hidden behind a door, as my father received the information that his grandson, in reality, his son had died shortly after birth. I saw no sadness in his face. I saw calculation. I saw concern for the deal he had made and now couldn't fulfill. And when he asked about the body, to give it a proper burial, I saw the lie in his eyes. He wanted proof. He wanted to be sure. "The body has already been sent to the city morgue," Dr. Isaac replied with a conviction that impressed me. "It's standard procedure in cases of neonatal death. The mother is sedated, in a state of shock. It would be best to come back tomorrow." Arthur hesitated, clearly suspicious, but he had no way to argue with a doctor in his own hospital, especially about procedures he didn't know. As he walked away, reluctantly, Dr. Isaac joined me in the back corridor. The doctor's quick thinking has bought them precious time, a temporary victory in a terrifying war. But they all know he'll be back, and likely with the authorities. The race is now on to get Sophia and her fragile newborn to safety before he uncovers the truth. Keep listening to see if their desperate gamble pays off. "Let's go," he said urgently. He didn't completely believe it. He'll be back, and with authorities this time. The drive to Tampa was a nightmare of tension. The ambulance was ahead of us, carrying Sophia, still weak from surgery, and Gabriel, fighting for every breath in his portable incubator. With every bump in the road, I held my breath, imagining the impact on my nephew's tiny body. "He's going to make it," Dr. Isaac said, as if reading my thoughts. "I've seen smaller babies survive. Medicine has advanced a lot in this area." We arrived at Tampa General Hospital in the early evening. Dr. Jacobs, a medical school colleague of Dr. Isaac's, was waiting for us with a team ready. Gabriel was immediately taken to the neonatal ICU and Sophia to a private room, under a false name again. In the days that followed, I lived between Sophia's room and the ICU, where Gabriel fought for his life. Every time the monitor indicated a drop in the baby's heart rate, every time the doctors rushed to the incubator, I felt as if my own heart stopped. A week after the birth, when Gabriel had just turned 7 days old, Dr. Jacobs called me into his office for a talk. "Laura, I need to be honest with you," he began with a grave expression. "Gabriel has a serious lung infection. The antibiotics aren't working as we had hoped." I felt the floor disappear from under my feet. "Is he going to die?" "I'm not saying that," the doctor answered carefully. "But you need to be prepared for the possibility, and we need to discuss whether we should tell Sophia now, in her current state." Sophia was still recovering from the C-section, with severe anemia from blood loss. The doctors feared an emotional shock could cause a dangerous relapse. "Don't tell her," I decided after a moment of reflection. "Not yet. Let me stay with Gabriel. If the worst happens, I want at least one of us to be with him." That night, I received special permission to stay in the neonatal ICU. Sitting beside Gabriel's incubator, I watched his tiny chest rise and fall with difficulty, his minuscule fingers occasionally twitching, as if trying to grasp something. "Hello, Gabriel," I whispered, placing my hand on the side of the incubator. "I'm your Aunt Laura. I know you don't know me yet, but I want you to know that we already love you so much. Your mom is so eager to meet you, to hold you. You have to fight, understand? You have to be strong for just a little while longer." The hours passed slowly. The alarms went off twice during the night, bringing nurses running. Both times, they managed to stabilize him. The third time, however, was different. The monitor began to beep frantically. His oxygen saturation was dropping rapidly. An entire team entered the room, pushing me aside. Pressures dropping, oxygen at 70%, starting resuscitation. I watched, paralyzed, as they worked on the tiny body. A doctor performed chest compressions with just 2 fingers, so small was Gabriel's chest. A nurse adjusted the respirator, increasing the oxygen flow. For 20 minutes, they fought to bring him back. 20 minutes that felt like an eternity. And then, when I had lost all hope, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. The steady, regular beep of the heart monitor. "He's back," the exhausted doctor announced. "I don't know how, but he's back." That dawn, sitting beside the incubator, I made 2 promises. The first was to Gabriel. "I will take care of you and your mother for the rest of my life. No one will ever hurt you again." The second was to myself. "One day, I will understand all of this. I will learn how to save lives like yours. I will become the kind of doctor who protects children and mothers, who fights for them when no one else will." Looking at that tiny soul, I didn't just see my nephew. I saw my life's purpose, my dear's. Pain can either destroy us, or it can forge us into something stronger. That night, beside Gabriel, I chose to let my pain be forged into the strength to heal others. It's in our most profound moments of helplessness that our greatest purpose can be born. Witnessing this tiny soul's struggle for life, Laura's own path became clear, forged in the fires of trauma and love. This single promise will shape the rest of her life and the lives of countless others, as you're about to hear. Gabriel survived that critical night, and then the next, and the one after. Every day was a small victory. Every ounce he gained, every improvement in his tests, was a miracle. A month after his premature birth, Sophia was finally able to hold him for the first time. Gabriel was still connected to monitors and tubes, but he was strong enough for a brief kangaroo care session, the skin-to-skin contact that strengthens the bond between mother and child. Seeing my 5-year-old sister, still a girl herself, holding her son with such love and protection, was the most powerful image I have ever witnessed. In that moment, I knew we had made the right choice in running away, that despite all the suffering, all the hardship, we had broken a cycle of abuse and horror. Gabriel would be loved, Sophia would be protected, and I would be the fortress they both needed, a promise I have kept my entire life. Gabriel remained in the neonatal ICU at Tampa General for 3 months. Those were days of anguish interspersed with small victories. The first day without the respirator, the first time he breastfed from Sophia, the first time he hit 2 pounds. Each milestone was celebrated like a battle won in a war we were slowly starting to believe we could win. During this time, Sophia and I took turns by the incubator. She spent her days with her son, learning how to care for such a fragile baby, to interpret every change in his behavior. I worked nights as an aide in the same hospital, thanks to a recommendation from Dr. Jacobs, and stayed with Gabriel during the early morning hours. It was during these silent nights, watching the monitors that recorded my nephew's vital signs, that my decision to become a doctor solidified. I absorbed every piece of information, observed every procedure, and asked endless questions of the doctors and nurses caring for Gabriel. "You have a calling for this," commented Dr. Iris, the neonatologist who followed Gabriel's case. "You have the clinical eye and the necessary compassion." In January 1974, when Gabriel was finally discharged, we faced a new reality. We had survived the worst, but what now? Where would we go? How would we build a life? Sophia was only 15, I was 20, and we had a baby who still needed special care. It was Dr. Iris who offered us a solution. She had a sister, Magdalene, who lived in Columbia, Missouri. Magdalene was a school principal and had been a widow for several years, living alone in a house too large for one person. She always wanted children, but was never able to conceive, Dr. Iris explained. Since her husband passed, she lives for her school. "I'm sure she would love your company and could help with the baby while you work or study." The offer seemed too good to be true. A house in a distant city where our parents would be unlikely to find us, and someone willing to help us without asking too many questions. Why would she do this for us? I asked, suspicious after so many disappointments. Dr. Iris smiled kindly. "Because I asked her to, and because Magdalene knows good people when she sees them. Besides, she's been alone for a long time. You'd be doing her a favor, too." And so, in February 1974, we set off for Columbia, me, Sophia, and Gabriel. Now almost 4 months old, but still so small he looked like a newborn. In our suitcase, besides the few clothes we had, we carried falsified documents that Dr. Jacobs had managed to get through contacts at the hospital. Our only protection against the possibility of being found. The journey was long and tiring, with 3 bus transfers and constant stops to care for Gabriel. When we finally arrived at the Columbia bus station, it was late at night. Magdalene was waiting for us on the platform, a tall, slender woman with gray hair and a severe bun, but with kind eyes that lit up when she saw Gabriel. "So, this is the little warrior," she said, leaning over the bundle in Sophia's arms. "Welcome to Columbia. My home is your home for as long as you need." Magdalene's house was an old building in the central part of the city, with large windows, a spacious yard, and airy rooms. It had been the residence of the former school principal, her late husband, and it maintained the austere dignity of a bygone era. Although Magdalene made it clear she expected no formalities. "Here, we are all family," she said as she showed us to our rooms. "No ceremonies, no questions about the past. What matters is the future we are going to build." In the first few months, we adapted to the new routine. Sophia cared for Gabriel full-time, still recovering herself from the traumatic birth. I got a job at the only pharmacy in town, using my experience as a nurse's aide. And Magdalene, true to her word, became a kind of grandmother to Gabriel, caring for him when we needed to go out, singing lullabies she had learned in her own childhood. It was Magdalene who first mentioned the possibility of Sophia returning to school. "She's too smart to just stay at home," she commented one evening at dinner. "She could finish middle school at my school. I'm sure she would excel." "But what about Gabriel?" Sophia asked hesitantly. Since her son's birth, she had not been separated from him for more than a few hours. "I'll take care of him in the mornings while you study," Magdalene offered. "And in the afternoons, when I'm at school, Laura can be with him. Slowly, he'll grow and become more independent. And you'll be able to finish high school, maybe even go to college." The idea of Sophia completing her education seemed like a distant dream, but Magdalene was persistent. In August of that year, 6 months after our arrival in Columbia, Sophia went back to school. At first, She only went for half a day, always with a heavy heart, calling home during breaks to check on Gabriel. But over time, she gained confidence. Her teachers soon noticed her intelligence, her thirst for knowledge after so much time away from her studies. "Your sister has a bright future ahead of her," Magdalene commented after the first parent-teacher conference. "The teachers are impressed with her dedication." Meanwhile, my own dream began to take shape. Magdalene, upon learning of my desire to become a doctor, introduced me to an old friend of her husband's, Dr. Elliott, a retired physician who had been a professor at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine. "Laura has potential," she told him during a dinner at her house. "She just needs guidance to prepare for the entrance exams." Dr. Elliott, a gentleman with a white beard and lively eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, offered to help me with my studies. 3 times a week, after my shift at the pharmacy, I would go to his house for private lessons in biology, chemistry, and physics, all the subjects I would need to master to get into medical school. "You have the necessary determination," he would say whenever I got discouraged by the mountain of material to learn. "And you have something that can't be taught: compassion. You will be an excellent doctor." The months turned into years. Gabriel grew strong and healthy, with no apparent long-term effects from his premature birth. He was a cheerful boy with golden curls like his mother's, and an insatiable curiosity about the world. Sophia finished middle school with exemplary grades and entered high school, now planning to apply for college to study education, inspired by Magdalene to discover her own calling for teaching. In 1977, 3 years after our arrival in Columbia, I finally felt ready to take the MCAT and apply. I applied for medicine at the University of Missouri Kansas City, about a 2-hour drive from Columbia. It was a risky choice. Studying far away meant less time with Sophia and Gabriel, who was already 4 years old. But it was also the fulfillment of a dream born in the darkest moments of our lives. The wait for the results was agonizing. When the list of accepted students was finally published in the newspaper, Dr. Elliott showed up at our house before breakfast, newspaper in hand, a huge smile on his face. "You did it, girl," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "You're in." The joy of that moment is etched in my memory forever. Sophia jumping for joy, Gabriel not understanding the reason for the commotion but laughing along, Magdalene discreetly wiping away tears. And I, feeling for the first time that the future we had dreamed of was truly within our reach. For the next 6 years, I lived between 2 worlds. Weekdays in Kansas City, immersed in my medical studies, and weekends in Columbia, enjoying every moment with Sophia and Gabriel. The sacrifice was great, the longing constant, but with every new subject I learned, every procedure I mastered, I felt closer to fulfilling the promise I had made beside Gabriel's incubator. Sophia, for her part, enrolled in the education program at a college near Columbia, which allowed her to continue living at home with Gabriel. Magdalene, now retired from her position as principal, was the foundation that kept our little family running, taking care of Gabriel when we were both studying. In 1983, almost 10 years after our escape from Hannibal, I graduated as a medical doctor. The graduation ceremony was one of the happiest days of my life. In the audience, Sophia, now 25 and a certified teacher, applauded with tears in her eyes. Gabriel, a smart and energetic 9-year-old boy, watched everything with admiration. And Magdalene, our savior, now a lady with completely white hair but still the same determined sparkle in her eyes, smiled with the pride of someone who sees a dream they helped build finally come true. "What are you going to do now, Dr. Laura?" Gabriel asked during the celebration dinner, fascinated by his aunt's new title. "I'm going to do my residency in obstetrics," I replied, ruffling his golden curls. "I'm going to learn how to bring babies into the world, just like you." "Like me?" he asked, confused. Sophia and I exchanged a look. We had never told Gabriel the whole truth about his birth, about who his father was. He only knew that his father had died before he was born, and that he had been raised by his mother and his aunt. "Yes, like you," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "You were born in a special way, remember? Before your time, needing a lot of help to survive. The doctors and nurses who took care of you inspired me to follow this path." The residency in obstetrics was intense and challenging. I chose the University of Missouri Hospital in Kansas City, known for its work with high-risk pregnancies, exactly the kind of cases that interested me, for obvious reasons. For 3 years, I practically lived inside the hospital, attending births, performing surgeries, learning to handle the most complex situations a pregnancy can present. In 1986, with my residency completed, I received an invitation that would once again change the course of our lives. Dr. Jacobs, the doctor who had cared for Gabriel in Tampa and with whom I had kept in sporadic contact, called to offer me a position at the newly inaugurated municipal hospital in Columbia. "We're putting together a first-rate obstetrics team," he explained. "And I immediately thought of you. It would be perfect. You could work in your field and be close to your family." I accepted without hesitation. The idea of returning to Columbia, now as a qualified doctor, to work in the same place where I had built a new life, seemed like the perfect closing of a cycle that had begun with so much pain. Sophia, who was now teaching at the same school where Magdalene had been principal, received the news with enthusiasm. Gabriel, then a bright 12-year-old, was thrilled at the idea of having his aunt nearby again. And Magdalene, though her health was now frail due to her advanced age, declared that she could now depart in peace, knowing that her family was reunited and safe. Magdalene didn't get to see my first day as a doctor at the Columbia Municipal Hospital. She passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks before I started my job. Her funeral brought together hundreds of former students and colleagues, a testament to a life dedicated to education and caring for others. "She saved our lives," Sophia whispered, as we laid flowers on her coffin. "Without her, I don't know what would have become of us." "We will honor her memory," I replied, hugging my sister. "We will continue the work she started, helping other people rebuild their lives just as she did for us." And that is exactly what we did. In the years that followed, I built a solid career as an obstetrician. I specialized in cases of adolescent pregnancy and vulnerable situations girls, like Sophia had been, often victims of violence without family support. Within the hospital, I created a support program that went beyond medical care, offering psychological support, legal guidance, and social assistance. Sophia, for her part, became a respected educator, eventually taking over as principal of the school where Magdalene had worked for decades. Her special focus was on at-risk children, for whom the school often represented the only safe and welcoming environment. As for Gabriel, he grew up without knowing the full truth about his origins, at least until he was a teenager. Sophia and I decided he deserved to know the truth when he was old enough to understand it. On his 15th birthday, we sat down with him and told him everything. The abuse, the pregnancy, our escape, our parents' terrible plan to sell him. It was a difficult conversation, full of tears and painful questions, but it was necessary. "So, my father is also my grandfather?" he asked, trying to process the terrible information. "Biologically, yes," Sophia answered, with a courage that moved me. "But a father is much more than biology. A father is someone who loves, who protects, who teaches. You've had many fathers throughout your life. Dr. Isaac, who risked his career to save us. Dr. Jacobs, who cared for you when you were so small you could fit in the palm of a hand. Dr. Elliot, who taught Laura and supported my studies. And you had a wonderful mother figure in Magdalene, who gave us a home when we had nothing." Gabriel absorbed that difficult truth with surprising maturity. In the days that followed, he asked many questions, wanted to know details about his premature birth, about how we had survived, but never, not once, did he blame Sophia or show shame about his origins. "You two are the bravest people I know," he said a few days later. With his words, the final chain to their dark past was broken. Gabriel's response proved that love, not biology, is what truly defines a family, turning a legacy of horror into one of courage. Their past no longer has power over them, but what became of the parents who started it all? The story isn't quite over yet. And one day, I want to be a doctor like Aunt Laura, to help other people the way you were helped. That day came. Gabriel graduated from medical school, specialized in pediatrics, and today works alongside me at the municipal hospital in Columbia. Together, we care for mothers and babies in vulnerable situations, offering not only medical treatment, but also the hope that, with support and determination, it is possible to rebuild a life from the ashes of suffering. As for our parents, we never saw them again. Years later, through acquaintances from Hannibal, we learned that Arthur passed away in 1985 from cirrhosis of the liver, a consequence of years of alcoholism. Dolores is still alive, as far as we know, living in a nursing home in Street Lewis. Sophia once tried to make contact by sending a letter with no return address, containing a photo of Gabriel at his graduation. She never received a reply. I asked Sophia once if she was angry that our mother never replied. She just shook her head. "I didn't send the letter for her, Laura," she said softly. "I sent it for me, to let her know that despite everything, she couldn't erase us. That we built a beautiful life from the rubble she left us in. Her words taught me a profound lesson about forgiveness. It isn't about absolving the other person or waiting for an apology that may never come. It's about taking back your own story." We never sought out Dolores again. Our peace was not dependent on her remorse. We found our healing not in forgetting the past, but in refusing to let it define our future. But the lack of reconciliation with the past does not diminish the fullness of our present. We built a life that, in the darkest moments of our journey, seemed impossible. We raised a boy who became an admirable man, despite the terrible circumstances of his conception, and we transformed our pain into purpose, using our experiences to help others find their own path to healing. As I told a scared young mother just yesterday at the hospital, life can begin in the most unlikely places, in the most painful circumstances, but what matters is not how we start, but the direction we choose to go in afterward. The morning sun in Colombia has a special glow. It's the first thing I notice when I open the curtains in my room, in this house I've lived in for almost 50 years. Time flies when you build a life with purpose, doesn't it? Today, at 72, I look out the window at the garden that Sophia and I cultivated together. Red roses, blue hydrangeas, colorful geraniums that remind us of the wildflowers in the Missouri hills. Sophia always says our garden is like our story, something beautiful that grew from difficult soil, with a lot of work and patience. My daily routine starts early. Even though I officially retired from the hospital 5 years ago, I still see a few special patients in my private practice. They are mostly high-risk pregnancies or very young girls frightened by the responsibility before them. For these girls, I offer more than medical knowledge. I offer the understanding of someone who has been on the other side, who has felt the same fear. "You're different from other doctors," a 16-year-old girl told me last week after a difficult consultation where she revealed that the father of her baby was a married man who now denied paternity. "It's like you can read my mind, like you already know what I'm feeling before I even say it." I smiled at her, holding her trembling hands. "Every story is unique," I replied. "But the fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being alone, those feelings I know well, and I can assure you that, as hard as it seems now, you will find a strength you never knew you had. On the days I don't see patients, I dedicate myself to the project I founded almost 2 decades ago, the New Dawn Home, a shelter for pregnant women in vulnerable situations. It's a welcoming space on a property on the outskirts of Columbia, where we offer not only temporary housing but also job training, psychological support, and complete medical care. Many of the young women who have passed through are now successful professionals, nurses, teachers, social workers, and some return as volunteers, completing a cycle of healing and giving back. Sophia, now 67, remains active even after retiring as school principal. She created an adult literacy program that operates at the New Dawn Home, allowing the young mothers to continue their studies while receiving support for their babies. My sister, whose own education was once so brutally interrupted, found her greatest fulfillment in educating others. As for Gabriel, my dear nephew, he is now a 52-year-old man, a respected pediatrician in the city and region, married to Claire, a nurse he met during his medical residency. They have 3 children. Lucas, 25, also a medical student, Helena, 22, studying psychology, and the youngest, Michael, 16, who hasn't decided on his calling yet, but already shows a talent for the arts. Gabriel knows the whole truth about his origins, but it has never stopped him from building his own identity, his own story. "We are defined by the choices we make, not the circumstances of our birth," he always tells his children. It's a lesson he learned early and carries as a life motto. On Sundays, our most precious family tradition has remained unchanged for decades. Lunch on the back porch, under the shade of the apple tree we planted when we arrived at this house. The large wooden table, made by Magdalene's late husband and preserved with care, accommodates the whole family. Sophia and I, Gabriel and Claire, the 3 grandchildren, and occasionally close friends who have become part of our chosen family. At these gatherings, there is always music. Lucas plays the guitar like no one else, stories being shared, and lots of laughter. Sophia makes her famous chicken and dumplings, a recipe she learned from Magdalene and perfected over the years. I'm in charge of dessert, usually an apple pie or a seasonal peach cobbler. The young ones bring their news, their dreams, and plans for the future, while we, the elders, listen with hearts full of gratitude for having come this far. Sometimes, when lunch is over and the afternoon lazily unfolds, Sophia and I sit alone on the porch, watching the family's activities in the garden. In these moments, we don't need words. A look, a smile, a squeeze of the hand is enough to communicate what we feel. The journey we shared created a bond between us that transcends even the strong tie of sisters. "It was worth it," Sophia whispered in one of those moments a few weeks ago. "Even with all the pain, all the fear, it was worth it." I nodded, watching Gabriel play with his youngest son, the same golden curls glistening in the sunday, every single minute of it. My relationship with God has also transformed over the years. From initial anger and incomprehension, how could a loving God allow so much suffering? I have moved to a mature faith that finds purpose even in the most painful experiences. I attend the small church near my house, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. And when I pray, I give thanks not only for the obvious blessings, but also for the difficult paths that brought me here. A few weeks ago, I received a letter that made me reflect deeply on our journey. It was from a young woman who had stayed at the New Dawn home almost 10 years ago, pregnant at 15, rejected by her family, with nowhere to go. Today, she is an obstetric nurse, working in a public hospital in Jefferson City. She wrote to tell me she had named her second daughter in my honor. "Laura, you taught me that our past does not determine our future," the letter said, "that we can turn our wounds into wisdom, our pain into compassion for others. I hope my little Laura grows up with the same strength and determination I saw in you." That letter made me cry, not from sadness, but from a deep joy in knowing that our story, mine, Sophia's, Gabriel's, continues to reverberate, touching other lives, creating waves of transformation that go beyond what we can see. Sometimes I think of Hannibal, of the house on Cobblestone Lane, of the girl I once was. I think of the long road we traveled since that cold August morning when we left everything behind with just one suitcase and the desperate hope for a better future. We never went back to that town, not even to visit. Some places are best left in the pages of the past. But Hannibal is not just a place of pain in my memories. It is also where I learned the strength of true family bonds, where I discovered that a sister's love can move mountains, where the determination that brought me here was born. Like the precious gems that give that city its name, something valuable emerged from the dark depths of our experience. Now, in the twilight of my life, I feel a peace that seemed impossible during the sleepless nights of my youth. It is not a peace that comes from the absence of challenges. My body feels the weight of age. I've lost dear friends over the years, and the world out there is still full of injustices that outrage me. But it is a peace born from the certainty that we did the best we could with what life gave us, that we chose love over bitterness, hope over despair, construction over destruction. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? Not just to survive the storms of life, but to learn to dance in the rain, to find rainbows where others see only dark clouds, to turn scars into marks of a battle won. This is the story I tell my younger patients when I see in their eyes the same fear I once saw in Sophia's eyes. I don't tell the dark details, of course, but I share the essence. That even from the most desperate situations, a bright future can be born if we have the courage to take the first step, to seek help, to believe that we deserve more than the fate others tried to impose on us. Here in Colombia, in the house that Magdalene left us and that we expanded over the years, we found not just refuge, but a true home, a place where we put down deep roots, where we wrote a new story, no longer defined by trauma, but by healing, not by what was taken from us, but by what we built together. And if there is one lesson I have learned in my 72 years of life, it is that the power to start over is always within our reach, that it is never too late to rewrite our story, to turn pain into purpose, to choose the light, even after the longest darkness. The whispers from that dark house in Hannibal have long been silenced, replaced by the joyful laughter of my grandnephews in the garden. The fear that once gripped my heart has given way to a profound peace, especially when I see Sophia, her eyes full of light, surrounded by the family we built from the ashes. Our true story is a testament that the human spirit can be reborn, that love can sprout from the most broken ground. If our journey has touched you, please subscribe to the channel to continue sharing these moments with me.